Welcome back to We on World is One. We are glad you're watching. I'm Eric Njoka. The headlines. Amid their tariff war, Donald Trump says US and Canada will work together to resolve business conflicts as he talks with Canadian Prime Minister at the White House. Trump says he will talk about lowering tariffs on Canadian sectors. President Trump says there is a real chance of a Gaza peace deal as Hamas and Israeli negotiators hold indirect talks on the second anniversary of the October 7th attack. Ukraine's energy minister says Russian attacks dealt significant losses to Ukrainian gas production, adding that Ukraine and Kyiv are set to increase gas imports by 30%. At least 15 people dead and several others injured as a private bus struck by a massive landslide in northern Indian state of Himachal Pradesh's Bilaspur district. Rescue operations are currently underway. Taliban acting Foreign Minister Amir Muttaqi welcomes Russia's recognition of his government, with the Kremlin calling for the removal of sanctions against the group. Muttaqi holds talks with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov at the 7th Moscow format consultations in Russia. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi dials Russian President Vladimir Putin, wishes him on his 73rd birthday. The two leaders affirmed their commitment to deepen India-Russia's strategic partnership. Afghan Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi says any foreign military presence, including reported rumors of a possible return of US forces to Bagram Air Base, is unacceptable for the people of Afghanistan. This as he addressed a regional summit in Moscow. Elections to the Tibetan parliament in exile to be held in two phases on the 1st of February and 26th of April next year, says Tibetan Election Commission in India's Dharamshala. Tibetans living in exile across the world can vote. Briton John Clark, Frenchman Michael H. Devoret, and American John M. Martinis win Physics Nobel Prize. The trio was awarded for the discovery of macroscopic quantum mechanical tunneling. We begin with some breaking news coming in from India. 15 people are reportedly dead and several others were injured in Bilaspur district of Himachal Pradesh after boulders hit a private bus amid landslide triggered by heavy rain. Officials said that 15 bodies were recovered so far from the mangled remains of the bus when the boulders hit it after a rain-triggered landslide in the Balughat area in Bilaspur. The bus was carrying 28 to 30 passengers. Bilaspur recorded 12.7 millimeters of rainfall today. At least 3 people have been rescued from the ill-fated bus and admitted to a hospital. Police officials said the accident took place at about 6:30 p.m. when a landslide hit the bus, which was on its way from Marotan to Gumariwin. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says he was saddened by the loss of lives in the mishap and announced an ex gratia of 2 lakh rupees to the kins of those dead. Let's talk to our special correspondent, Idris Lone, who's now joining us on the phone. Idris, what's the latest from your end?
Well, Eric, so far 15 bodies have been recovered from the site where a rescue operation is being carried out by the authorities. What we are hearing is 30 to 35 passengers were on board on this bus when basically the accident happened. And there was a massive landslide in the area due to which it had occurred. So far, 15 bodies have been taken out, but over 15 bodies are still missing. 15 people are still missing. Authorities don't know whether those people are under the debris or have been located or on the safer places. But the authorities are carrying out a massive rescue operation at this site. The Chief Minister has also expressed grief over the accident and also directed all the officials of the state administration to expedite the rescue operation at the incident site. If we talk about the area right now, the whole of North India has been battling severe cold wave as well as rains and snowfall in the last few days, and authorities already had given out advisories all across North India to be careful in the areas which are prone to landslides, mudslides, and this seems to be an area where there was a massive landslide which struck this vehicle, in which more than 30 people were in the vehicle, but 15 bodies have been recovered so far. The rescue operation is still going on.
All right, that is our special correspondent Idris Lone with the latest on the Bilaspur district accident, where 15 people have lost their lives and several others were injured after a private bus was hit by boulders amid landslides triggered by heavy rain in that district.
What happens when a president deploys military forces against his own citizens? That's the question Americans are asking today amid a growing showdown between President Donald Trump and state governments. And his plan to deploy National Guard troops to parts like Portland and Chicago has sparked legal as well as political battles. But more importantly, it's also triggered a series of questions. Questions about the limits of presidential power in the United States overall, because this is not just a domestic debate. It's about the rule of law in a democracy and the stability of its institutions as well. These are issues that the world has been monitoring closely. And Donald Trump has framed these deployments as necessary to combat what he calls lawlessness, to support immigration, and to support customs enforcement agents carrying out his immigration agenda. State and local officials, however, see it quite differently. They have called these moves unnecessary and a clear overreach of federal authority. In Illinois and Chicago, the state and city have filed lawsuits aimed at stopping the federalization of their National Guard troops, calling the plan illegal, dangerous, and unconstitutional. A coalition of several cities from across the country filed a court brief late Monday, supporting Oregon's attempt to block National Guard soldiers from being used in U.S. cities. The brief also claimed that Trump had plans to send them to 19 more states. Various leaders say they were gravely concerned that any protest, real or perceived, will actually result in another unnecessary deployment of the military. Cities signing on to support Oregon include Boston, Denver, Seattle, Chicago. A federal judge did not block the deployments for now, but has given the administration a deadline to explain why they should be allowed to proceed. Meanwhile, in Oregon, a Trump-appointed federal judge temporarily blocked the president's efforts to send National Guard troops to Portland. In response, the White House has asked an appeals court to pause that order, keeping the battle moving through the courts. Over the weekend, in fact, Trump authorized 300 Illinois National Guard members to deploy to Chicago to protect federal officers and assets, while the Texas governor offered 400 of his state's troops at the president's discretion. Reports have said that Texas Guard troops have already been mobilized and were seen landing in Indiana, though it remains unclear exactly what role they will be playing once in Chicago. And as the legal battles unfolded, Trump openly suggested he might invoke the Insurrection Act, a centuries-old law dating back to 1792, to deploy military forces domestically in limited circumstances, even without a state's consent. And he told reporters in the Oval Office, I'm quoting, "We have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I would do that," quote unquote. Now, the Democratic leaders have disputed the president's claims of rising violence. They have said that the crime numbers in some cities are down. The Illinois governor, in fact, has accused the federal administration of creating a premeditated escalation of violence in order to justify invoking the emergency powers. He said, and I'm quoting here, "The Trump administration is following a playbook. Cause chaos, create fear and confusion, make it seem like peaceful protesters are a mob, all to create a pretext for sending the military into our city," quote unquote. Despite the controversy, the judge, who was appointed by former President Joe Biden, declined to issue an immediate restraining order in Illinois and set a hearing for Thursday, asking the government to provide more information about the deployments. The state attorney general and Chicago's legal counsel have accused Donald Trump of using the military to punish his political enemies. They said that no American should live under the threat of occupation simply because their local leaders are out of favor with the president. Meanwhile, in Portland, the district judge, a Trump appointee, wrote that the president's claims were simply untethered to the facts and said that the U.S. is a nation of constitutional law, not martial law, quote unquote. The White House, meanwhile, is appealing this ruling. The controversy coming as the Trump administration faces a mounting legal pushback, not just from Illinois and Oregon, but from other states as well. California, for example, had filed a legal suit early this year itself after federal troops were sent to Los Angeles to quell the protests related to immigration crackdown, a case that continues to wind its way through the courts. Homeland Security Secretary, meanwhile, has defended the plan to send troops to Chicago, calling the city a war zone. But public opinion appears skeptical. According to a recent CBS poll, 58% of Americans oppose deploying the National Guard. 58%. Deploying the Guard to U.S. cities in this way. But even as the showdown between Trump and state governments continues, it may become a test case for the entire country, raising important questions like how far can a U.S. president really go when it comes to deploying military forces on his own soil? Are these moves truly about protecting citizens? Or are they an overreach of federal power? And perhaps most importantly, how will the world view American democracy if domestic military deployments become a political tool in a way?
We have great love for each other. I love this. I love Canada, the people of Canada. And Mark feels the same way about here. The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, meaning the U.S. wants a car company. And they want steel and we want steel. You know, so in other countries, they're very far away. And there's no problem. You can compete and you can do. We don't like to compete because we sort of hurt each other when we compete. And so we have a natural conflict. It's a natural business conflict. Nothing wrong with it.
Let's be clear about the relationship as it stands right now. We are the second largest trading partner of the United States. We do a lot of trade going across the border where we're cooperating, first thing. Secondly, we are the largest foreign investor in the United States. $500 billion in the last 5 years alone, probably $8 trillion in the next 5 years if we get the agreement that we expect to get. Thirdly, there are areas, as the President just said, where conflict, maybe not so much conflict, we compete. There are areas where we compete, and it's in those areas where we have to come to an agreement that works. But there are more areas where we are stronger together, and that's what we're focused on. And we're going to get the right deal for America, right deal, obviously, from my perspective, for Canada.
So USMCA, are the two of you both committed to seeing it through in the renegotiation of that deal that you made?
Well, we can renegotiate it, and that would be good, or we could just do different deals. We're allowed to do different deals if we want. We might make deals that are better for the individual
What's your
countries. I don't care. I want to make whatever the best deal is for this country, and also very much with Canada.
Is it the White House's position that furloughed workers should be paid for their back pay?
I would say it depends on who we're talking about. I can tell you this, the Democrats have put a lot of people in great risk and jeopardy, but it really depends on who you're talking about. But for the most part, we're going to take care of our people. There are some people that really don't deserve to be taken care of, and we'll take care of them in a different way. Okay? Thank you.
Mr. President, why do you say some federal workers should not get their back pay? Why do you say some?
Well, you're going to have to figure that out, okay? Ask the Democrats that question. Go ahead.
Mr. President, just to follow up there, I mean, the law says that when the government is reopened, that workers will receive their back pay. So are you going to defy the law there, or what?
I follow the law, and what the law says is correct, and I follow the law.
Amid the negotiations aimed at ending the war in Gaza, our next report explores whether or not Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been successful to achieve his goals in the 2-year-long operations in Gaza.
Before Hamas launched a scathing attack on Israel, geopolitical plates in West Asia were shaky, but there was an uneasy status quo in the region. One that did not evolve, Israel launching its most lethal ground offensive in Gaza, and also did not spill over to Israel's neighboring countries of Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, and even Syria. Post-October 7, 2023, Israel tanks went deep inside Gaza to dismantle Hamas's underground tunnel networks. Israel completely halted all aid coming to the enclave. It killed Hamas's most prominent leaders, including Yahya Sinwar in Gaza's shattered building and Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh on Iranian soil. What began as a special operation to wipe out Hamas by Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu quickly turned into one of the bloodiest wars in the region. Slowly and gradually, the war resulted in isolation of Israel's longest-serving prime minister. The impact of Israeli operations has been staggering. For the first time in decades, UN declared famine in northern Gaza. That is projected to expand to Deir el-Balah and Khan Yunis. Almost 89% of Gaza's water and sanitation infrastructure is damaged. 92% of residential buildings are reduced to rubble. Schools and universities are shut. Nearly 300 journalists have lost their lives, and over 67,000 Palestinians have been killed as human rights agencies decry genocide. Israeli Prime Minister and his cabinet vehemently deny the claim. A broad popular support for Israel has fallen. Allies like France, Italy, Canada, supporting Israel's operation against Hamas, have now recognized a Palestinian state. The latest testimony was Netanyahu addressing almost an empty UN hall at the high-level United Nations General Assembly.
But we're not done yet. The final elements, the final remnants of Hamas are holed up in Gaza City. They vow to repeat the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again, no matter how diminished their forces.
Israel's recent strike in Doha has not only angered the Qatari leadership, but also Trump, who has provided a security guarantee to his Arab ally, while the U.S. has spent over $20 billion to support Israeli operations. Trump nudged Netanyahu to accept his peace proposal, citing that Israel has lost international support and that this is the best deal Israel can get. While the far-right ministers aim to expand Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, Trump says he won't tolerate annexation of the Palestinian territory. When the war began, Netanyahu had vowed to finish Hamas and bring all the 250 hostages back home. But nearly 2 years on, Netanyahu is learning the limits of what can be achieved by military power alone.
Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu's visit to the Oval Office this week and the major announcement of a Gaza peace plan is what stole all the media headlines. But for me, the bigger story was Trump's commitment to another Middle Eastern ally. And here's why. In September, Israel undertook an unprecedented strike against an Arab Gulf capital in Doha, Qatar, trying to get at Hamas officials. It failed, and what it ended up doing is putting President Trump in a bind. Saudi Arabia was quick to react. It signed a mutual defense deal with the Pakistanis, effectively extending Pakistan's nuclear umbrella to the Arab Gulf. Egypt and Turkey also reacted, very quickly papering over past differences and launching joint naval exercises just off the Israeli coast in the eastern Mediterranean. Trump's ties to these Arab nations run deep. He chose Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE as the first foreign destination for his visit, not only in the first term, but also more recently in his second term. During these trips, he signed billions of dollars worth of contracts in foreign investments, tech, defense, energy, and other fields. Up until this week, President Trump had actually done very little to rein in Israel. He's allowed it to operate freely not only in Gaza, but also in Lebanon and Syria, really culminating with that attack in Doha, Qatar. But he now understands that he also needs to manage relations with these critical Arab Gulf allies. Otherwise, that will undermine the business deals and the security relationship that he has with that part of the world. So will President Trump be able to maintain that critical balancing act between America's Arab allies and Israel on the one hand, or would it all come apart in the lead up to the crucial visit of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to the White House in November? We'll have to wait and see.
Now to Venezuela, where President Nicolas Maduro said his government warned Washington about plans by a local extremist terrorist group to place an explosive device at the U.S. Embassy in Caracas. In a televised address, the president announced that his security forces prevented what he described as a false flag operation aimed at planting explosive at the U.S. Embassy.
This is a typical false flag operation, we could call it. A typical provocation operation to then create a scandal and use the communication power through networks and media to blame the Bolivarian government and start an escalation of confrontation where nobody's going to ask how it was done, who did it, where nobody's going to listen to anyone, but instead they're going to hear the rattling of machine guns and missiles. So, it was a provocation action.
He added that the operation was intended to escalate tensions between Venezuela and the U.S., but President Maduro stated that two sources, one domestic and one international, had informed the government of a possible attack by what he referred to as extremist sectors of the local Venezuelan right.
Now it's been confirmed, and as soon as I personally was able to verify that in the information we had there was a credible and very destructive threat by the terrorist group that was taking care of this type of thing, I ordered Comrade Jorge Rodriguez to communicate through all channels with the United States government. He did it immediately. The reaction of the people who communicated with Jorge Rodriguez was positive.
Now, according to Maduro, the terror group may have placed an explosive device at the U.S. Embassy with the intent of laying blame of the Venezuelan government and provoking a conflict with the United States. He added that the operation was allegedly backed by individuals whose names will be disclosed in due course and that investigations are still ongoing.
The investigation continues. I can say that this afternoon, Dr. Jorge Rodriguez, head of peace dialogues for Venezuela, officially informed the United States government of those responsible for preparing this terrorist attack and where those responsible are located. He also informed them that as far as we're concerned, we're pursuing the search and capture of some of these individuals who are in Venezuelan territory.
Now, the embassy has been largely inactive since March of 2019 following President Donald Trump's decision during his first term in office to break ties with Maduro. Since then, the embassy has maintained only staff responsible for security and the upkeep of the premises. Diplomatic tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela have only been compounded by a series of recent U.S. military strikes targeting Venezuelan vessels which Washington claims were carrying drugs. At least 4 vessels have been attacked in the past few weeks, with over 20 people reported killed in these strikes. Speaking to the U.S. Navy sailors in Virginia, President Trump described the operations as stopping drugs at an unprecedented level.
In recent weeks, the Navy has supported our mission to blow the cartel terrorists the hell out of the water. You see that? And you know, there are no boats in the water anymore. You can't find any. We're having a hard time finding them. But, you know, it's a pretty tough thing we've been doing, but you have to think of it this way. Every one of those boats is responsible for the death of 25,000 American people and the destruction of families.
President Trump has accused Maduro of being one of the world's major drug traffickers. Maduro, however, has repeatedly dismissed these claims, accusing the United States of fabricating the narrative in an effort to remove him from power. The news of an alleged plan to attack U.S. Embassy in Caracas comes as a report indicated that President Trump has called off diplomatic outreach to Venezuela. The report stated that the U.S. president has instructed his special envoy Richard Grenell to cease negotiations with Maduro's government. Now, amid these tensions, hundreds of Venezuelans marched in Caracas on Monday demanding respect for the country's sovereignty and peace. Political and social groups organized a demonstration displaying banners rejecting foreign interference and showing support for President Maduro.
To North American imperialism, we reaffirm, we will not trust them, not even a little bit. Our worker president Nicolas Maduro stands firm with his people to resist the blows of imperialism and emerge victorious in this battle through the construction of peace.
And as the investigation into alleged embassy attack continues and both nations maintain a strong military presence, the ties between the U.S. and Venezuela remain volatile, leaving growing concerns about what comes next.
North Korea has unveiled a new hypersonic missile at an arms expo in the country's capital, Pyongyang. The development coming amid a warning from the supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, that no area in South Korea is safe, claiming North Korea can strike anywhere using advanced weapons, including hypersonic missiles. Take a look.